Hook. In the endless darkness of space, where mighty civilizations span thousands of years and command technologies beyond imagination, humanity crawls forward like an infant learning to walk. We are the newcomers, the primitives, the species that other races watch with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Our ships are crude metal boxes compared to their elegant vessels that bend reality itself. Our weapons are simple projectiles, while theirs manipulate matter at the atomic level. Yet sometimes, in the most desperate moments, when all the advanced technology and ancient wisdom fails, the universe calls upon the most unlikely heroes. Sometimes, it calls upon humans. Captain Sarah Chun had seen her share of impossible situations during her 15 years commanding salvage operations in the Kepler sector. The Determination, her modified cargo hauler, wasn't much to look at with its patched hull plating and mismatched engine pods, but it had pulled more ships out of trouble than any vessel twice its size. Today's mission seemed routine enough. Investigate a distress beacon from the asteroid belt near Kepler 442b. Contact ahead, Captain, reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the sensor station. His weathered hands moved across the human-built control panels with practiced ease. Looks like a Zephyrian scout ship, but something's wrong with the signature. Sarah leaned forward in her command chair, studying the readouts on the main screen. The Zephyrians were one of the more advanced species in this sector, their technology easily 1,000 years ahead of Earth's best. Their ships were beautiful works of art that could dance between stars faster than human minds could comprehend. To see one sitting dead in space was like finding a broken rainbow. Life signs? She asked. Weak readings, Webb replied, his brow furrowed. Very weak. And, Captain, there's something else. The ship appears to have crash-landed on that asteroid, and somehow bounced back into space. The damage patterns are consistent with underground impact. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's medic and scientist, looked up from her station. Asteroid KPR 7749 has an unstable core composition, mostly iron and nickel, but with pockets of reactive gases that form when exposed to certain energy signatures. If they went underground. She shook her head. The environment down there would be lethal to most species. All the more reason to get them out, Sarah said firmly. Rico, get us in close for docking. Rico Martinez, their pilot and engineer, grinned from the helm. You got it, boss. Fair warning, though, that Zephyrian ship looks like it went 10 rounds with a particle storm. Docking might be tricky. The Determination moved through space with the steady purpose that defined human engineering. It wasn't fast or elegant, but it was reliable. As they drew closer to the damaged vessel, the extent of the destruction became clear. The Zephyrian ship's beautiful crystalline hull was cracked and scorched, its graceful curves twisted into jagged angles. I'm reading atmosphere in one section, Webb reported, but it's venting slowly through multiple hull breaches. Emergency dock then, Sarah ordered. Webb, get me a comm channel to that ship. The connection crackled with interference, but eventually a voice came through, young, frightened, speaking in broken galactic standard. Please, is anyone there? Please help us. Sarah's blood ran cold at the desperation in that voice. This is Captain Chun of the human vessel Determination. We're here to help. What's your situation? Human. The voice carried a note of surprise mixed with hope. Please, you must help. My name is Kira Veltar. I am only 12 cycles old. My mother, she is trapped underground on the asteroid. The ship, we crashed trying to escape, but the toxic atmosphere, it's killing her. Dr. Vasquez was already running calculations on her tablet. Captain, if there's someone trapped in those underground caverns, they won't last long. The gas composition would be lethal to Zephyrian physiology within hours, maybe less. Can you get to us? Sarah asked over the comm. We're preparing to dock. Yes, I can reach the docking port. But please hurry. Mother's life signs are fading. The emergency beacon, it was all I could do. Everyone said no one would come for a Zephyrian ship this far out. But you came. Humans came. There was something in the child's voice that made Sarah's chest tighten. Fear, yes, but also a desperate trust that somehow this ragtag human crew could accomplish what apparently no one else would even attempt. Docking in 30 seconds, Rico called out. This is going to be rough, but I can make it work. The Determination shuddered as it connected with the damaged Zephyrian vessel. Air hissed through the temporary seal, and the ship's systems groaned under the stress. But the connection held. "Webb, you're with me," Sarah ordered, grabbing her sidearm and emergency kit. "Elena, prep medical supplies for a Zephyrian adult. Rico, keep us stable and monitor both ships' atmospheres." The airlock cycled, and Sarah found herself face to face with a young Zephyrian girl. Kira was small even for her species, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Her large, dark eyes held tears, and her normally elegant features were twisted with worry. She wore what had once been a beautiful silver garment, now torn and stained with various fluids from the ship's damaged systems. "You really came," Kira whispered, looking up at the two humans with wonder. "They said humans were weak. They said your technology was primitive. But you came when no one else would." Sarah knelt down to the child's eye level. "That's what we do. Now tell me about your mother." Kira's words came in a rush. "We were on a survey mission to catalog mineral compositions in this sector. Mother is a geological specialist. But we found something we weren't supposed to find. The hegemony patrol ships came after us. We tried to hide in the asteroid field, but they forced us down into the caverns beneath KPR 7749. The hegemony?" Webb's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. The hegemony was a militant alliance of older species that viewed humanity's recent entry into galactic politics with suspicion and hostility. "They didn't know about the gas pockets," Kira continued. "When our ship's engines heated the underground chamber, it triggered a chemical reaction. The caverns filled with toxic clouds. Mother pushed me toward the ship, told me to take off and call for help. But the gases damaged our engines. I barely made it back to space." Sarah studied the girl's face carefully. "Kira, why won't the other Zephyrian ships come to help?" The child's expression grew bitter beyond her years. "Because Mother discovered something the hegemony wants to keep secret. Something about human space. If the hegemony finds out other Zephyrians know about it." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "So the choice is let your mother die, or risk hegemony retaliation," Sarah concluded grimly. "But you came," Kira said again, her voice filled with something between amazement and hope. "Humans came even though you don't know what Mother discovered. Even though you have nothing to gain." Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I've analyzed the atmospheric readings from that asteroid. The gas composition is indeed lethal to Zephyrian physiology, but..." She paused. "But it wouldn't be immediately fatal to humans. We could survive down there for several hours with basic protection." Webb raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking what I think you're thinking, aren't you, Captain?" Sarah was already moving toward the Determination's equipment locker. "I'm thinking a little girl asked us for help, and that's reason enough. Rico, prep the shuttle for atmospheric entry. Webb, load emergency life support gear. Elena, I want portable medical equipment ready for a Zephyrian adult." "Captain," Webb said carefully, "if the hegemony is involved in this, a rescue mission could be seen as an act of aggression." Sarah paused in her preparations and looked at her crew. These were good people, all of them. They'd signed up for salvage work, not international incidents. She had no right to ask them to risk their lives for strangers. "Anyone who wants to stay with the ship, I understand completely," she said. "This is my call, not yours." Rico snorted from the pilot's seat. "Like hell, boss. You think we're going to let you go down there alone?" "The hegemony has been looking for an excuse to push humanity out of this sector for months," Dr. Vasquez added, joining them in the equipment bay. "Maybe it's time they learned that pushing around humans isn't as easy as they think." Webb was already checking his gear. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't do anything too heroic and get yourself killed." Kira watched this exchange with growing wonder. "You would do this? Risk war with the hegemony? For my mother? But you don't even know us." Sarah looked down at the young alien girl and felt something settle into place in her chest. This was why humans were out here among the stars. Not for conquest or glory, but for moments like this, when someone needed help, when the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. "Kid," she said gently, "where we come from, family is family. It doesn't matter what species you are." 20 minutes later, the modified shuttle Persistence descended through KPR 7749's thin atmosphere toward the cavern entrance. The asteroid's surface was a nightmare landscape of twisted metal and crystalline formations. The Zephyrian ship had carved a deep gouge in the rocky surface before disappearing into a natural cave system. Atmospheric readings are off the charts down there, Rico reported from the pilot's seat. That gas mixture would kill a Zephyrian in minutes, but our suits should handle it for a few hours. Mother's emergency beacon is still transmitting, Kira said. The caverns beneath asteroid KPR 7749 were a vision from humanity's darkest nightmares. Poisonous green vapors swirled through chambers carved by millions of years of cosmic impacts and chemical erosion. The walls dripped with acidic condensation that hissed when it struck the rocky floor. Emergency lighting from Kira's mother's equipment cast eerie shadows that seemed to move and writhe in the toxic atmosphere. Captain Sarah Chun led her team deeper into the maze, following the weak signal from the Zephyrian emergency beacon. Each step took them further from safety and closer to an environment that defied every principle of safe space exploration. The readings on their suit sensors painted a picture of atmospheric composition that should have been instantly lethal to any known life form. Oxygen concentration is less than 3%, Dr. Elena Vasquez reported through the comm system, her voice slightly distorted by the environmental suit's filters. Hydrogen sulfide levels are through the roof, and there's some kind of metallic particulate that's interfering with our instruments. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, bringing up the rear, kept his weapon ready despite knowing that conventional firearms would be useless against the real enemy they faced, time. Signal strength is increasing, he reported. We're getting closer. Sarah paused at a junction where 3 tunnels branched off into the asteroid's depths. Her suit's headlamp illuminated crystalline formations that might have been beautiful under other circumstances. Now they looked like the bones of some massive creature, picked clean and left to rot in this poisonous tomb. Kira, can you hear us? She called into her comm unit. The young Zephyrian's voice crackled back with barely contained anxiety. Yes, I can hear you. The beacon signal is strongest in the center tunnel. But, Captain Chun, the gas readings, they're getting worse. Sarah's HUD displayed atmospheric analysis data that made her stomach clench. The deeper they went, the more concentrated the toxic mixture became. It was like descending into the digestive system of some cosmic monster that fed on metal and exhaled death. Elena, how long before this stuff starts eating through our suits? She asked. Dr. Vasquez consulted her tablet, running calculations with the grim efficiency of someone who'd seen too many dangerous environments. With current exposure levels, we have maybe 2 hours before suit integrity becomes compromised. But if the concentration increases, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They pressed onward through the center tunnel, their boots squelching in puddles of chemical slurry that had accumulated in the floor's irregular depressions. The walls here showed signs of recent damage, scorch marks from energy weapons, and the twisted remains of Zephyrian equipment scattered like broken dreams. This wasn't just a crash, Webb observed, examining the debris. Someone was shooting at them down here. Sarah nodded grimly. The evidence painted a clear picture of a pursuit that had ended in this toxic hellscape. The hegemony forces had chased the Zephyrian survey ship into these caverns, probably knowing full well what the environmental conditions would do to any survivors. Contact ahead, Webb reported suddenly, raising his hand to halt the team. Energy signature. Very faint, but definitely artificial. They rounded a bend in the tunnel and found themselves in a larger chamber where the true scope of the disaster became clear. The rear section of the Zephyrian ship lay embedded in the cavern wall like a metal tumor. Its beautiful crystalline panels were cracked and darkened, and toxic gases leaked from multiple breaches in the hull. But there, in the center of the chamber, a small emergency shelter glowed with the soft blue light of Zephyrian life support systems. The beacon signal was coming from inside. Mother, Kira's voice burst through the comm with desperate hope. She must be in the emergency pod. Sarah approached the shelter carefully, her instruments scanning for any signs of structural damage. The device was impressive, a self-contained life support system that had somehow managed to maintain atmosphere in this hellish environment. But even Zephyrian technology had its limits. Life signs inside, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. But they're very weak. and the shelter's power cells are almost depleted. Sarah found the shelter's communication interface and activated it. After a moment of static, a weak voice responded in Galactic Standard. Who is there? This is Captain Chun of the human vessel Determination. We're here to rescue you. Your daughter Kira sent us. A long pause, then, humans? But how is this possible? The atmospheric conditions are unpleasant, but manageable, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. Ma'am, we need to get you out of there immediately. Your shelter is failing. My name is Dr. Lyra Veltar. The voice continued, growing stronger with hope. Captain, you must understand, what I discovered here, it changes everything. The hegemony cannot be allowed to suppress this information. Webb exchanged glances with Sarah. Doc, we can discuss that once we get you to safety. Right now, we need to focus on the rescue. The rescue? Dr. Veltar's voice took on a note of despair. Captain, I am trapped. When the hegemony weapons damaged our ship, debris fell across the shelter's exit portal. I cannot move the wreckage from inside, and the shelter's power will not last long enough for me to wait for proper equipment. Sarah examined the shelter more closely. True enough, a twisted beam of Zephyrian hull metal lay across what appeared to be the only exit. The beam was easily 3 times the weight any single human could lift, and their rescue equipment hadn't been designed for heavy construction work. Elena, how much time does she have? Sarah asked. Dr. Vasquez ran her scanner over the shelter's exterior. Power cells show maybe 30 minutes of life support remaining. After that, she shook her head. Webb was already examining the debris, looking for leverage points or weak spots they might exploit. This metal is designed to withstand particle beam weapons. Our cutting tools won't make a dent in time. For a moment, the team stood in frustrated silence. They had come so far, risked so much, only to be defeated by a simple engineering problem. The advanced civilizations of the galaxy would have sophisticated gravitic manipulators or molecular disruptors to handle this situation. Humans had determination and a few basic tools. Wait, Sarah said suddenly. Webb, remember the mining operation on Series 7? When the tunnel collapsed? Webb's eyes widened with understanding. The hydraulic jacks from the mining equipment. But, Captain, we don't have mining equipment down here. No, Sarah agreed. But we have something better. Rico, can you hear me? The pilot's voice crackled back from the shuttle on the surface. Loud and clear, boss. How's the rescue going? We need you to bring the shuttle down into the caverns. Can you manage atmospheric flight in this environment? A pause while Rico ran calculations. It'll be tricky with all the gas interference, but the Persistence was designed for adverse conditions. What do you need me to do? We need the shuttle's landing thrusters to provide hydraulic force. Think you can position the ship to push against this debris? Using a shuttlecraft as a giant hydraulic jack? Rico's voice carried a mixture of admiration and concern. Boss, that's either brilliant or completely insane. Dr. Vasquez was shaking her head. Captain, the thrust from shuttle engines in a confined space like this, the exhaust could destabilize the entire cavern system. Or it could save Dr. Veltar's life, Sarah replied firmly. Rico, how precise can you be with the maneuvering thrusters? Give me something to work with, Rico responded. What kind of clearance are we talking about? Sarah examined the cavern dimensions and the positioning of the debris. You'll need to nose the shuttle into the chamber, angle the engines toward the beam, and provide just enough thrust to shift it without bringing the whole asteroid down on our heads. No pressure then, Rico muttered. Kira, you still with me up here? The young Zephyrian's voice was tight with anxiety. Yes. Can this work? Can you really save my mother with a human ship? Kid, Rico replied with characteristic confidence. You're about to see why humans don't back down from impossible problems. We just make them someone else's problem instead. The sound of shuttle engines echoed through the caverns as Rico began his descent. The Persistence was never designed for this kind of precision maneuvering in confined spaces, but human engineering had always prioritized adaptability over specialization. Beginning approach, Rico reported. Cavern mouth is tight, but manageable. Elena, I'm going to need constant updates on structural integrity. Dr. Vasquez deployed her geological scanners, monitoring the rock formations around them. The cavern is more stable than I expected, but any significant vibration could trigger a collapse. The shuttle appeared at the chamber entrance like a mechanical angel, its running lights piercing the toxic gloom. Rico maneuvered the craft with delicate precision, using tiny bursts from the maneuvering thrusters to navigate the tight space. Almost in position, he announced. But I'm reading dangerous buildup of exhaust gases. This atmosphere doesn't want to clear properly. Dr. Veltar, Sarah called into the shelter's comm system. We're about to attempt extraction. You need to be ready to move the instant that beam shifts. Captain, the Zephyrian scientist replied. I must tell you what I discovered. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. Sarah interrupted firmly. We're all going home together. Rico positioned the shuttle with the precision of a surgeon, aligning the engine nozzles to push against the debris at the optimal angle. Everyone might want to step back. This is going to get loud. The shuttle's thrusters fired, filling the chamber with a controlled explosion of energy. The beam of Zephyrian hull metal groaned under the pressure, shifting fractionally. Toxic gases swirled in violent eddies as the engine wash disrupted the cavern's atmospheric patterns. It's moving, Webb shouted over the noise. But not enough. More thrust, Sarah called to Rico. Any more, and I'll destabilize the cavern, Rico replied. Sarah stared at the beam, calculating angles and leverage points with the practiced eye of someone who'd solved impossible problems before. Suddenly, she grabbed a piece of debris and wedged it under the beam at a crucial stress point. Now, she yelled. Rico fired the thrusters again, and this time the combination of engine thrust and mechanical leverage was enough. The beam shifted with a grinding screech of metal on stone, opening a gap just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Dr. Veltar now, Sarah commanded. The shelter's portal opened, and a figure in a damaged Zephyrian environment suit emerged. Dr. Lyra Veltar was taller than her daughter, with the same shimmering blue skin and large dark eyes. But where Kira's features held the softness of youth, her mother's face bore the sharp intelligence of a trained scientist, and the exhaustion of someone who'd been breathing poisoned air for hours. Webb and Dr. Vasquez helped the rescued Zephyrian toward the shuttle while Sarah monitored the precarious debris pile. Rico, kill the engines, and prepare for immediate departure. What about the beam? Webb asked. As if in answer to his question, the damaged metal began to shift again, this time without the shuttle's thrust to hold it in place. The improvised leverage point was failing. It's going to collapse, Dr. Vasquez warned. They ran for the shuttle as the cavern began to shake. Behind them, the emergency shelter was crushed under tons of falling debris that would have entombed Dr. Veltar forever if they had arrived even minutes later. Rico lifted off with the desperate urgency of a pilot who knew that staying meant dying. The Persistence climbed through the toxic atmosphere as the cavern system below them began a chain reaction of collapses. Surface in 30 seconds, Rico announced. Everyone's still breathing? Sarah checked her suit readings and found that the atmospheric exposure had been worse than expected. Their equipment was already showing signs of chemical damage from the corrosive environment. Another hour down there, and their suits would have failed completely. Dr. Veltar, how are you holding up? Dr. Vasquez asked, running medical scans on their rescued passenger. The Zephyrian scientist managed a weak smile. I am alive. Thank back aboard the Determination. The rescue team gathered in the ship's small medical bay while Dr. Elena Vasquez examined Dr. Lyra Veltar for signs of toxic exposure. The Zephyrian scientist sat on the examination table with her daughter Kira pressed close against her side, both of them still processing the reality that they were alive and safe. Captain Sarah Chun watched the reunion with a mixture of satisfaction and growing concern. The rescue had been successful, but the questions surrounding it were multiplying faster than she could find answers. Why had the hegemony been chasing a simple geological survey mission? What had Dr. Veltar discovered that was worth killing for? Physiologically, you're in remarkable shape considering what you've been through, Dr. Vasquez announced, checking her scanner readings. Some minor respiratory irritation from the toxic exposure, but nothing that won't heal with time. The emergency shelter's filtration systems were excellent, Dr. Veltar replied, her voice stronger now that she was breathing clean air again. But, Captain Chun, I fear our troubles are far from over. What I discovered on that asteroid, it will change the balance of power in this entire sector. Sarah pulled up a chair beside the examination table. Dr. Veltar, before we go any further, I need to understand what we're dealing with. My crew risked their lives down there, and now they deserve to know why. The Zephyrian scientist looked at her daughter, then back at Sarah. What do you know about the hegemony's expansion plans? Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who had been monitoring communications from the bridge, joined them in the medical bay. We know they've been pressuring human colonies to accept protection agreements that look suspiciously like surrender treaties. The official story is that human space is too unstable for self-governance, Dr. Veltar continued. Too young, too primitive, too dangerous to the established galactic order. But what I found on KPR 7749 proves that story is a lie. She activated a small data device that had been concealed in her environment suit. Holographic displays filled the air above the table, showing complex geological surveys and mineral composition analyses. This asteroid belt was formed by the destruction of a planetary body approximately 50,000 years ago, Dr. Veltar explained. But the destruction wasn't natural. It was artificial. Someone deliberately shattered an entire world. Rico Martinez whistled low from the doorway, where he'd been listening. That's a lot of firepower. We're talking about planetary-scale weapons. Indeed, Dr. Veltar agreed. But here's what makes this discovery truly significant. The mineral compositions and radiation signatures match exactly with similar patterns found throughout what is now human space. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying that human space was created artificially? That entire star systems were deliberately cleared of their original inhabitants? Not just cleared, Dr. Veltar said grimly. Sterilized. Whoever did this wanted to ensure that no trace of the original civilizations remained. They created a perfect buffer zone of empty systems between hegemony space and the outer galactic rim. Kira looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. But why would they do that? Because something is coming from beyond the rim, Dr. Veltar replied. Something that scared the hegemony's ancestors enough that they committed genocide on a galactic scale to create a defensive barrier. Dr. Vasquez was running calculations on her tablet. If this is true, then humanity wasn't guided to empty star systems by chance. We were deliberately allowed to settle in a region that was designed as a buffer zone. A buffer zone and a test, Dr. Veltar corrected. By observing how humans develop in these systems, the hegemony can study how different species adapt to the environmental conditions they'll face when the real threat arrives. Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. You're telling me that entire human colonies exist at the hegemony's sufferance? That we're nothing more than experimental subjects in some cosmic laboratory? I'm telling you that the hegemony has been preparing for a war that most species don't even know is coming, Dr. Veltar replied. And they've decided that humanity represents either their best hope for victory or their greatest threat to survival. The medical bay fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's life support systems. Outside the viewports, the stars looked the same as they always had. But now they seemed somehow more distant, more hostile. Mother, Kira said quietly, is that why the patrol ships were chasing us? Because you found proof of what they did. Partially, Dr. Veltar admitted. But there's more. The data I collected shows that the weapons used to destroy these worlds are still operational. Hidden throughout the sector in automated defense platforms that respond to specific threat signatures. Webb leaned forward. What kind of threat signatures? Unknown, Dr. Veltar replied. But, based on the positioning of the platforms and the coverage patterns, whatever they're designed to fight comes from the direction of the galactic core, not the rim. Sarah was beginning to understand the full scope of what they'd stumbled into. The hegemony didn't just commit genocide 50,000 years ago. They built a weapon system that could do it again if they decided it was necessary. And if humanity's development threatens their control of that system. Dr. Veltar didn't need to finish the sentence. Rico shook his head in disbelief. So we're stuck between whatever's coming from outside the galaxy and a bunch of ancient murder machines that think we're getting too uppity. Great. It's worse than that, Dr. Veltar said. The automated defense platforms aren't just weapons. They're powered by the life force of the civilizations they destroyed. Every planet that was sterilized became a battery to fuel the defensive grid. The horror of that revelation settled over the rescue team like a shroud. They were living in a galactic graveyard, their colonies built on the bones of murdered worlds, all to serve the paranoid needs of species that viewed them as expendable test subjects. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez said carefully, "if this information is accurate, we can't just pretend we never heard it. This affects every human colony in the sector." Sarah nodded grimly. "The question is, what do we do about it?" "You get me to the Zephyrian Council," Dr. Veltar replied immediately. "There are members of my government who have suspected the truth for decades. With this evidence, we might be able to build a coalition of younger species to oppose hegemony control." "And if the hegemony finds out you're still alive?" Webb asked. "Then, they'll send everything they have to stop us," Dr. Veltar admitted. "But, Captain Shun, your species has already proven something important today. When faced with an impossible situation, humans don't surrender. They find a way." Kira looked up at the assembled humans with something approaching awe. "You saved my mother from a place where no rescue should have been possible. You used primitive technology to accomplish what advanced civilizations said couldn't be done." "We used what we had," Sarah replied simply. "Sometimes that's enough." "Sometimes it's more than enough," Dr. Veltar corrected. "Do you know why the hegemony really fears humanity? It's not because of your technology or your military strength. It's because you make decisions based on what's right rather than what's safe." The ship's communication system suddenly chimed with an urgent alert. Rico rushed to the nearest console and pulled up the sensor displays. "Captain, we've got multiple contacts approaching fast. Configuration suggests hegemony-heavy cruisers." Sarah was already moving toward the bridge. "How long until intercept?" 20 minutes, maybe less," Rico replied. "And boss, there's something else. They're broadcasting a general order to all ships in the sector. Anyone found harboring Zephyrian fugitives will be considered hostile to hegemony interests." Dr. Veltar struggled to her feet, still weak from her ordeal. "Captain, you must leave us behind." "If they find us on your ship—" "Not happening," Sarah interrupted firmly. "We didn't come this far to abandon you now. But your crew, your ship, will do what's right," Sarah finished. "Webb, get to the bridge and plot a course for the nearest neutral station. Rico, I want maximum power to engines and shields. Elena, how quickly can you prepare Dr. Veltar for extended travel?" Dr. Vasquez was already gathering medical supplies. "She's stable enough for normal ship operations, but if we end up in a firefight—" "We won't," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "We're going to outrun them." Kira grabbed her mother's hand tightly. What if they see the bridge of the Determination had transformed from a place of routine salvage operations into a war room where every decision could mean the difference between freedom and annihilation? Captain Sarah Chun stood behind the command chair, watching the tactical display as 3 hegemony-heavy cruisers closed the distance with inexorable precision. "Range to nearest cruiser, 800,000 kilometers, and closing," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the sensor station. "They're not responding to our identification broadcasts." Rico Martinez's hands danced over the helm controls with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years coaxing maximum performance from reluctant machinery. "Boss, these ships are big and fast. The Determination is tough, but we're not built for running from warships." In the ship's small passenger compartment, Dr. Lyra Veltar and her daughter Kira monitored the situation through the internal communication system. The Zephyrian scientist's face was drawn with the terrible knowledge that her discovery had put innocent humans in mortal danger. "Captain Chun," Dr. Veltar's voice came through the intercom. "Please reconsider. If you surrender us to the hegemony, your ship and crew will be spared." Sarah activated the comm unit without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Dr. Veltar, with respect, that ship sailed the moment we decided to help your daughter. We're all in this together now." "Incoming transmission from the lead cruiser," Webb announced. "They're demanding we prepare to be boarded for inspection under Hegemony Emergency Protocol 7. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her station where she'd been analyzing the Hegemony ship configurations. Protocol 7 is essentially martial law. They can seize any ship, arrest any crew, and confiscate any cargo they deem threatening to sector stability. "Convenient," Sarah muttered. "Rico, how long until we reach the hyperspace limit?" 12 minutes at current acceleration, Rico replied. Boss, they'll be in weapons range in 6. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple. The human ship was outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed in every technical specification that mattered in a space battle. The hegemony cruisers carried particle beam weapons that could vaporize the determination from a distance that rendered human weapons useless. Their shields could absorb more punishment than the human ship could deliver in a sustained engagement. But humans had never been particularly concerned with fighting fair. Webb, full sensor sweep of the local system, Sarah ordered. I want to know about every piece of debris, every gravitational anomaly, and every cosmic phenomenon within 10 million kilometers. Aye, Captain. But what are we looking for? An advantage, Sarah replied simply. The sensor sweep revealed a typical asteroid belt system with the usual collection of rocky debris, gas pockets, and unstable or concentrations. But there, at the edge of sensor range, Webb detected something unusual. Captain, I'm reading a massive electromagnetic disturbance bearing 27 Mark IV. It appears to be the remnants of a stellar flare that's been captured by the gravitational interaction between two gas giants. Sarah studied the readings with growing interest. An electromagnetic storm? More like an electromagnetic hurricane, Webb corrected. The energy levels are off the charts. Any ship entering that field would be effectively invisible to sensors, but they'd also be flying blind. Rico whistled appreciatively. And their fancy targeting systems wouldn't work either. Captain, Dr. Vasquez interrupted, that level of electromagnetic interference would also disrupt our life support systems. We might gain tactical advantage, but we could die from system failures before the hegemony even finds us. Sarah weighed the options with the cold calculation of someone who'd faced impossible choices before. They could surrender and hope the hegemony showed mercy to Dr. Veltar and Kira. They could run and hope their ship held together long enough to reach hyperspace. Or they could turn their enemy's technological superiority against them. Rico, plot a course for the electromagnetic storm, she ordered. Boss, Rico replied carefully. That's either brilliant or completely insane. I'm hoping for both, Sarah admitted. Webb, send a message to the hegemony ships. Tell them we're experiencing engine difficulties and requesting assistance. The hegemony response came back within minutes. Human vessel determination, you will halt engines and prepare for immediate boarding. Any attempt to flee will be considered an act of aggression. Tell them we're trying to comply, but our engine controls are malfunctioning, Sarah instructed. We're drifting toward the outer system and can't correct course. It was a gamble that relied on hegemony arrogance and their assumption that human technology was inherently unreliable. The enemy commanders would expect a primitive human ship to suffer mechanical failures at the worst possible moment. They're buying it, Webb reported. All 3 cruisers are adjusting course to intercept our projected drift path. Good, Sarah said. Now comes the tricky part. Rico, I want you to use our maneuvering thrusters to nudge us closer to that electromagnetic storm, but make it look accidental, like we're struggling to regain control. Rico's piloting skills had been honed on mining ships and salvage operations where precision maneuvering meant the difference between success and catastrophe. Now he applied those skills to the delicate art of controlled deception, using tiny thruster burns to gradually alter their trajectory while maintaining the illusion of a ship in distress. Elena, how are our passengers holding up? Sarah asked. Dr. Vasquez checked her monitors. Dr. Veltar is stable, but both she and Kira are terrified. They know what the hegemony does to political prisoners. In the passenger compartment, Kira watched the tactical display with the wide-eyed fear of a child who understood that powerful people wanted to hurt her family. Mother, she whispered, what will happen to the humans when the hegemony catches us? Dr. Veltar pulled her daughter close. I don't know, little star. But these humans, they're not giving up. They're still fighting for us. Range to lead cruiser for 100,000 kilometers, Webb announced. They're demanding that we cut engines immediately. Tell them we're trying. But the engine control circuits are fried, Sarah replied. We're doing everything we can. The electromagnetic storm loomed ahead of them like a wall of invisible fire. Sarah's instruments could barely penetrate the interference to map its boundaries. But what they showed was both promising and terrifying. The storm was vast enough to hide a dozen ships, but the energy levels inside would push human technology to its absolute limits. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez said urgently, "I'm reading massive spikes in the storm's intensity. If we enter that field during a peak surge, it could overwhelm our shields completely. And if we don't enter it, those cruisers will overwhelm everything else," Sarah replied. "Rico, how close are we?" 30 seconds to storm boundary," Rico announced. "But, boss, once we're inside, I won't be able to see where we're going. We'll be flying by dead reckoning and prayer." "Then, we'd better make sure our prayers are louder than their sensors," Sarah said. The hegemony cruisers had realized something was wrong. Their communication channels were filled with increasingly urgent demands for the human ship to halt, followed by warnings that weapons systems were being powered up for a disabling shot. "They're preparing to fire," Webb reported. "Particle beam weapons are coming online." "Too late," Sarah said with grim satisfaction as the determination crossed the boundary of the electromagnetic storm. Immediately, the ship's systems went haywire. Lights flickered, communication channels filled with static, and the artificial gravity fluctuated in nauseating waves. But the tactical display showed something beautiful. The three hegemony cruisers had disappeared from sensors, their sophisticated detection equipment blinded by the same electromagnetic chaos that was making the human ship nearly uninhabitable. "Hull temperature rising," Dr. Vasquez reported, fighting to keep her instruments functional. "The electromagnetic field is inducing current flows in our hull plating." "Rico, can you still navigate in this mess?" Rico was flying purely on instinct now, using the ship's gravitational sensors, and what little he could see through the electromagnetic interference. "I can keep us moving, but I can't promise we won't run into something solid." The storm raged around them like the birth cry of a new star. Electromagnetic lightning danced across their viewports, and the ship's hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle. But they were alive, and more importantly, they were hidden. "Any sign of the hegemony ships?" Sarah asked. Webb struggled with his sensor controls. "Nothing. They're as blind as we are in here." "But, Captain, our life support systems are fluctuating. We can't stay in here indefinitely." "We don't need indefinitely," Sarah replied. "We just need long enough." She activated the intercom to the passenger compartment. "Dr. Veltar, how well do you know the hyperspace routes out of this system?" The Zephyrian scientist's voice crackled back through the electromagnetic interference. "There are several options, but the hegemony will have them all monitored by now." "What about unmonitored routes? Paths that might be too dangerous for normal traffic?" A pause. "Then, there's a corridor that passes close to a neutron star. The gravitational shear makes it extremely hazardous, but a ship with precise navigation could use it to reach the Zephyrian border." Sarah looked at Rico, who was grinning despite their desperate situation. "A neutron star corridor? Boss, you really know how to show a guy a good time. Can you handle it?" Sarah asked. "Can I handle it?" Rico repeated, mock offense in his voice. "I've threaded needles through asteroid fields that would make a hegemony pilot wet himself. A little gravitational shear is just Tuesday for me." The electromagnetic storm began to show signs of weakening as they moved through its outer regions. Soon, their sensors would start working again, but so would the hegemonies. They had minutes to make their escape before the enemy ships could reacquire them. Emerging from storm boundary in 90 seconds, Rico announced, "I'll need immediate coordinates for the neutron star corridor." Dr. Veltar's data flowed through to the navigation computers, showing a route that would have made any sane pilot request a transfer to desk duty. The corridor passed within a few thousand kilometers of a neutron star's surface, where the gravitational forces could stretch a ship like taffy if the pilot made even a small miscalculation. "Webb, the moment our sensors come back online, I want a full sweep for hegemony ships," Sarah ordered. "Elena, monitor all ship systems. The moment we clear the storm, we're going to push everything to maximum." The determination burst from the electromagnetic storm like a ship emerging from a nightmare. Their sensors immediately detected the three hegemony cruisers, spread out in a search pattern but facing the wrong direction. "They're looking for us near the hyperspace limit." Webb report the neutron star corridor stretched before them like a pathway through the jaws of death itself. The collapsed stellar remnant twisted space, and time into patterns that challenged both physics and sanity, its surface temperature exceeding 1 billion degrees, while its gravitational field compressed matter to densities that shouldn't exist in the normal universe. Captain Sarah Chun watched the navigation display with the focused intensity of someone who understood that the next few minutes would determine whether her crew lived to see another day. The determination was entering a region where the slightest miscalculation would reduce them to a stream of subatomic particles stretched across several million kilometers of space. Range to neutron star, 2 million kilometers, and closing, reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the sensor station. Gravitational distortion is already affecting our instruments. Rico Martinez gripped the helm controls with white knuckles, his eyes locked on the navigation computer's three-dimensional display of the corridor. The safe passage through the neutron star's gravitational field was less than 50 kilometers wide. A needle's eye that required precision beyond anything human technology was designed to achieve. Hegemony pursuit ships are still closing, Webb continued. They're maintaining distance, probably waiting to see if we survive the passage before following. In the passenger compartment, Dr. Lyra Veltar held her daughter Kira close as the ship's gravitational compensators struggled to maintain normal conditions inside the hull. The Zephyrian scientist's normally serene features were tense with the knowledge that she had guided these brave humans into a death trap. Captain Chun, Dr. Veltar's voice came through the intercom, barely audible over the groaning of stressed metal. I must apologize. I didn't realize how dangerous this passage would be for a ship of your configuration. Sarah activated the comm unit without taking her eyes off the navigation display. Dr. Veltar, any passage that gets us away from those cruisers is worth the risk. But the gravitational shear forces are just another engineering problem, Sarah interrupted firmly. And humans are very good at solving engineering problems. Dr. Elena Vasquez was monitoring the ship's structural integrity from her station, watching as the neutron star's gravitational field began to stretch the Determination's hull in ways that made the metal sing with harmonic frequencies. Captain, we're approaching the limit of what our hull can handle. The gravitational gradient is creating stress patterns that could tear us apart. Rico made a minute adjustment to their course, compensating for a gravitational eddy that could have crushed them like an empty can. Elena, how much structural integrity do we have left? Maybe 10 minutes at current stress levels, Dr. Vasquez replied grimly. But the worst part of the passage is still ahead. Sarah studied the navigation computer's projection of their route through the corridor. The neutron star's rotation created a complex pattern of gravitational waves that made the safe passage shift and weave like a living thing. What had seemed like a straight line from a distance became a three-dimensional maze that required constant course corrections. Rico, how are you handling the navigation? Flying by feel mostly, Rico admitted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ship's climate control. The gravitational fluctuations are playing hell with our instruments, but I can feel the ship responding to the tidal forces. It's like surfing a wave you can't see. Behind them, the Hegemony cruisers had begun their own approach to the neutron star corridor. Their more advanced technology gave them better shielding against gravitational effects, but their larger ships were also more vulnerable to the tidal forces that could rip a vessel apart. The lead cruiser is attempting the passage, Webb reported. Their commander must really want us badly to risk following us through this. Or he knows something about the importance of Dr. Veltar's discovery that we don't, Sarah replied. The neutron star itself loomed ahead of them like a malevolent eye, its surface roiling with magnetic storms that could sterilize entire solar systems. The collapsed stellar core was only 20 kilometers in diameter, but its mass exceeded that of Earth's sun. It was a cosmic impossibility made real, an object so dense that a teaspoon of its material would weigh as much as a mountain. Entering the compression zone, Rico announced. Everyone hang on. The Determination groaned like a living thing as it passed through the most dangerous part of the corridor. The neutron star's gravitational field compressed the ship's hull by several centimeters, while simultaneously stretching it along their direction of travel. Equipment failures cascaded through the ship's systems as delicate electronics succumbed to the impossible stresses. Hull breach on Deck 3. Dr. Vasquez called out. Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we're losing atmosphere. Life support is fluctuating, Webb added. Artificial gravity is down to 60%. In the passenger compartment, Kira pressed her face against her mother's shoulder as the ship shuddered around them. Are we going to die? She whispered. Dr. Veltar stroked her daughter's hair with hands that trembled only slightly. No, little star. These humans, they don't know how to give up. We're going to survive this. On the bridge, Sarah was beginning to understand why the hegemony considered humanity such a threat to the established order. Any rational species would have surrendered when faced with impossible odds. Any sensible crew would have turned back when their ship started falling apart around them. But humans had an almost pathological inability to accept defeat when the stakes were high enough. Rico, how much more of this corridor do we have to navigate? About 3 more minutes at current speed, Rico replied through gritted teeth. But, boss, I don't think the ship can take 3 more minutes of this. Sarah made a decision that would have horrified any engineer who'd spent years studying proper safety protocols. Then, we don't give it 3 minutes. Rico, full emergency power to engines. We're going to blast through the rest of this passage as fast as we can. Captain, Dr. Vasquez protested. At that acceleration, the additional stress will either get us through or tear us apart, Sarah finished. I'd rather die trying than die waiting. Rico's hands flew over the control panels, redirecting power from life support, artificial gravity, and even the emergency systems to feed the ship's engines. The determination leaped forward like a racehorse given its head, accelerating through the neutron star corridor at speeds that turned precision navigation into an act of pure faith. The gravitational forces around them became a blur of cosmic violence. Space itself twisted into knots that challenged the laws of physics, and the ship's hull sang with harmonics that sounded like the screams of tortured metal. But Rico's instincts proved better than any computer navigation system, guiding them through the maze of tidal forces with the unconscious grace of someone who'd learned to fly by making mistakes and surviving them. Structural integrity at 15%, Dr. Vasquez reported. We're holding together by pure stubbornness at this point. Just like humans, Sarah observed with grim humor. Behind them, the lead hegemony cruiser wasn't faring as well. The larger ship's more rigid construction couldn't flex with the gravitational stresses the way the Determination's cobbled-together hull could. Sarah watched on her sensors as the enemy vessel began to break apart, its sophisticated technology useless against forces that cared nothing for engineering specifications. One cruiser down, Webb announced. The other 2 are holding back. They're not following us through. Smart of them, Rico muttered, wrestling with controls that were becoming increasingly unresponsive. Though I'm not sure smart is going to get us out of this. The end of the neutron star corridor appeared on their sensors like a light at the end of a tunnel. Normal space beckoned beyond the gravitational chaos, promising relief from the cosmic torture chamber they'd been enduring. But they still had to reach it. Final approach, Rico announced. This is the tricky part. This wasn't the tricky part already? Dr. Vasquez asked incredulously. The exit requires precise timing, Rico explained, his voice steady despite their desperate situation. We need to escape the gravitational field at exactly the right moment, or the neutron star will sling us back into the corridor at twice the speed. Sarah watched the navigation display count down the seconds to their escape window. Everything they'd fought for, Dr. Veltar's discovery, Kira's safety, their own survival, came down to this single moment of timing. Now, Rico shouted, cutting the engines and letting the neutron star's rotation fling them out of the corridor like a stone from a sling. The Determination shot out of the gravitational field and into normal space with the violence of a cork popping from a bottle. Behind them, the neutron star continued its cosmic dance, indifferent to the human drama that had played out in its shadow. Hull integrity stabilizing, Dr. Vasquez reported with obvious relief. We're battered but intact. Hegemony ships? Sarah asked. Webb checked his sensors. No pursuit. They're staying on the other side of the corridor. In the passenger compartment, Dr. Veltar and Kira finally allowed themselves to believe they might survive. The young Zephyrian looked up at her mother with wide eyes filled with a mixture of terror and awe. The humans did it, Kira whispered. They really did it. Yes, Dr. Veltar replied, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. They really did. Sarah activated the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We've successfully cleared the neutron star corridor and evaded hegemony pursuit. Dr. Veltar, we're now in Zephyrian space. Where would you like us to take you? The Zephyrian scientist's response came back immediately. Captain, there's a research station at Zephyr Prime where I have allies in the government. If we can reach them with this information, then we might actually have a chance of changing things, Sarah finished. As the determination limped through space towards Zephyr Prime, its hull scarred and its systems barely functional, Sarah couldn't help but think about what they'd accomplished. They'd started the day as simple salvage operators, but they were ending it as the carriers of information that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. More importantly, they'd proven something that the hegemony and its allies needed to understand. Humans didn't fight because they were strong or advanced or destined for greatness. They fought because someone had asked them for help, and saying no simply wasn't in their nature. 3 days later, Dr. Veltar's evidence was presented to the Zephyrian Council, and from there to a growing alliance of younger species who had long suspected the truth about the hegemony's control of their sector. The discovery of the ancient weapon platforms and the genocide that had created human space sparked the largest political upheaval in galactic history. But all of that began with a simple moment in the darkness of space, when a frightened child had asked for help and a human captain had said yes. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most important battles in the universe were won not with weapons or technology, but with the simple willingness to do what was right. As Kira had said in that asteroid cavern, you came when no one else would. And that, as any human would tell you, was what made all the difference. They haven't detected our emergence yet. Rico, punch it, Sarah commanded. The human ship accelerated toward the neutron star corridor with every erg of power their engines could produce. Behind them, the hegemony sensors finally detected their escape, and the 3 cruisers turned to pursue with the fury of predators who'd been outmaneuvered by prey they'd considered helpless. Pursuit course laid in, Webb announced. They're faster than us, but we've got a significant head start. How significant? Sarah asked. Rico checked his calculations. Significant enough if this neutron star passage is everything Dr. Veltar says it is. As the determination raced toward a corridor that could crush them with invisible forces, Sarah Chen realized that her crew had moved far beyond simple rescue operations. They were now active participants in a galactic conspiracy that stretched back 50,000 years, carrying information that could reshape the balance of power among the stars. But, for now, all that mattered was keeping Dr. Veltar and her daughter alive long enough to share what they knew with the galaxy. Everything else would have to wait until they reached the other side of hell. Catch us. Sarah knelt down to look the young Zephyrian in the eye. Then, we'll figure something else out. That's what humans do. As the determination began to accelerate away from the asteroid field, Sarah couldn't help but think about the larger implications of what they'd learned. Humanity had always assumed they were free to make their own choices among the stars. Now they knew the truth. They were pawns in a game that had been playing for 50,000 years, caught between ancient fears and an unknown threat that might still be coming. But they were pawns with a choice. They could continue to live in ignorance, or they could fight for the right to determine their own destiny. As the hegemony ships appeared on their sensors, growing larger and more threatening with each passing moment, Sarah Chun made her choice. The determination and her crew would not surrender to fear. They would not abandon those who had asked for their help, and they would not accept a future written by species who viewed entire civilizations as expendable resources. All hands, prepare for emergency acceleration, Sarah announced over the ship's intercom. We're taking our friends home. To human ingenuity and courage. My people have a saying, the most elegant solution is often the most obvious one. But humans seem to have found a different truth. The most obvious solution is often the most elegant one. As they broke through to the surface and rejoined the determination, Kira's joyful voice filled the comm channels. Mother, you're safe. But even as the family reunion unfolded, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Dr. Veltar had spoken of a discovery, something important enough that the hegemony was willing to commit murder to keep it secret. And Now they had rescued the one person who knew what that secret was. The rescue had been a success, but Sarah suspected that the real challenge was just beginning. From the passenger seat, monitoring a small Zephyrian device. But the signal is getting weaker. Sarah checked her suit, seals one final time. The rescue gear was heavy and awkward, but it represented the best human engineering could offer. Not elegant, not advanced, but reliable when lives were on the line. Remember, Dr. Vasquez said over the comm, we go in fast, find her, and get out. No heroics, no exploring. Just rescue. The shuttle touched down near the cavern entrance, and the rescue team prepared to enter an environment that should have been impossible for any carbon-based life form to survive. But humans had a long history of going places they weren't supposed to go and doing things they weren't supposed to be able to do. Kira, Sarah said as they prepared to leave the shuttle, I want you to stay here with Rico. Monitor communications, and be ready to take off if anything goes wrong. But, Mother, we'll want to know you're safe, Sarah finished firmly. Trust us, we're going to bring her home. As the rescue team entered the toxic caverns beneath KPR 7749, none of them could have imagined that this simple act of compassion would set in motion events that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. All they knew was that somewhere in the poisonous darkness ahead, a mother was dying, and her daughter had asked them for help. And that, as any human would tell you, was reason enough.